work into decorating work, and I've met her first with projects related to the extension of the Royal Science Museum in London, an extension they called Welcome Wing. Hannah invited me at that time to propose work for this exhibition. This whole Welcome Wing Science Museum exhibition turned out to be a very important experiment. It was, so far as I know, first time that a science museum agreed on exhibiting artwork within the context of the science exhibits, and that turned out to be a very, very successful idea. I mean, it's a pretty efficient way to get another sort of visitors into a museum context, which you would never have caught them just with the normal science museum. And I remember at the opening you told me that all the media interest was focusing on the art exhibits far more than on the overall thing. Somehow it also, let's say, in terms of how you communicate a new museum, it became a very unconventional and successful operation. Now Hannah is working on a new huge gallery project somewhere in the middle of England, an area she is going to tell us more about. And I find it a very, very interesting art gallery and art activity context she's working in, because it's, again, a very unusual one. And I'm happy to have you here, and I pass the microphone to Hannah Redler.
Okay, so can people hear me all right? Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I know it's not your usual day, you usually do it on Mondays. Yeah, I give just a bit of background about me. I trained as a fine artist, as a painter, and after finishing art school, I went back to London, and I thought, what on earth am I going to do with this? And at the time, many of my friends were getting interested in digital technology. So a bunch of 6 of us decided to set up a digital media company. But we had very different interests. Some people wanted to do business, some people wanted to write extraordinary software. And I wanted to find out what digital stuff could do in gallery spaces. So I also trained as a curator at the same time. So that was really my reason for moving on from the company in 1998, when I was offered a job at the National Museum of Photography, Film and Television, where the museum had taken quite an extraordinary decision to use artists as the best people to communicate digital imaging technologies. So I was the assistant curator on that project, and artists such as Joachim Sauter, Toshio Iwai and Paul Sermon were incorporated into a new gallery there. After that, the Science Museum became aware of my work, and this is an image from the museum, of the new wing. The Welcome Wing is a very important development for Science Museum. It completed the building project of the museum, which was started 100 years ago. This was the final third of the museum. And the ambition for the Welcome Wing was to present contemporary science and technology to wide family audiences. And the 2 serious themes that were identified as being important for its first 5 years of existence were biomedical science and digital technology. And the museum, as Christian said, took the view that artists could really contribute to engaging people in questioning some of the issues and themes that come out from biomedical science and digital technology. And also, really not insignificantly, make a much richer visual environment. And it's important because it's important to make a statement about it not all being about dry information. But it's also, when you start working with digital technology and biomedical science, the role of the museum has to change, because the role of the museum in the industrial world was really about presenting beautiful objects. You know, the Apollo 9 capsule, Stephenson's engine, V2 rockets. These are extraordinary real objects that you can look at, and they, you know, it's very exciting to see the real thing. digital technology, as digital technology chips and computers, are really not attractive. So demonstrating extraordinary applications became quite important, and that was something we felt that artists could really assist us with. It was a particularly challenging project for the artists. I'm going to be very quick with this, because in terms of the digital gallery, this structure had already been defined when the money became available to invite artists. So my brief was to find 4 artists whose work would happily fit into this structure, and I was delighted that Christian was one of them. This is one of his pieces you may have seen. But I was very interested by your comment, Christian, that you knew that when you finished, it wouldn't be your work anymore, because it was your work within this cat and man design structure. They were the interior designers, within the sort of Uber brand of Science Museum. And very much with these large-scale visitor attractions, as an artist, in this context where it's a non-art museum, you are really contributing to a bigger experience, and it's an experience that is more focused on the visitor than you as an artist in a particular way. But that doesn't mean that your voice isn't important. The precision and rigour with which you deliver your idea, I think, is really very important. But it does demand a different type of collaboration and understanding, and almost generosity, I think, in your process. So very quickly, I'll just show you some of the other images. This is interior design by Castle Mann from the Biomedical Gallery. And these objects are objects designed to deliver interactive exhibits with information in them. And they're made to look kind of bodily. And that's a clip from a David Rokeby installation. We had sculptures. This is a tiny life-size iron baby from Anthony Gormley. Piece by Scanner, the digital artist, actually on the way to the toilet that makes unusual sounds when you walk through. And a piece by the British artist Tessa Elliott and Jonathan Jones-Morris. Again, then. But I don't really want to talk too much about the Science Museum. I'm happy to come back to it when we finish this, if people want to know more information specifically, because the project I'm working on now is really something that I see as an opportunity that everybody in this room might choose to be involved in at some point in the future, and I'd certainly be happy to hear proposals. So the context is Sandwell is a borough in the middle of England. It's one of the most deprived districts in the UK. There's 40% unemployment. And it's a place that's been very traditionally excluded. Is not a lot of cultural provision there at all. There's 300,000 people, which is about the same as the amount of people in Belfast or Alaska, or Bradford. You won't know Bradford. This is an example of the high street. At the moment, which is terribly unusual for a British high street, it's nearly all sole owners. So you don't have loads of global brand companies on the high street. Sometimes, you know, the best quality clothing is probably something like Walmart. It's not a very wealthy place. There's no bookshop, no art gallery, and one small cinema in the borough. And it's got amongst the lowest disposable income in the UK. So what do we do with this? This is a place where you might say there's no culture. Wrong. Sandwell is a borough that's very, very culturally diverse. There's large groups of people from Africa, from the Caribbean, Asian people, Polish, Yemeni. And these are people who in British culture have not necessarily had the loudest voices, which is a really large understatement. Jubilee Arts is the organisation I work for. And Jubilee is a community arts organisation that was started in 1974. It was set up by 4 artists who at the time were performance artists, and they were very interested in the United Nations directive that everyone has the right to participate in the cultural life of the community. So they set about doing interventionist projects that made sure that this would be. They bought a minibus, well, it's actually not a minibus, and they took the bus around the region because there were no galleries and very few theatres, and they did creative projects with the bus. Slowly video artists started to get involved with them, and different types of projects started to emerge. Sylvia King, who's the chief executive now, says that one of the impetuses for starting this project was that things weren't equal, and that couldn't be right. So we really felt like we needed to change things. in England, community art, I think it's different here, but it has quite a bad name. It's seen to be something that's low quality, not valuable, not important, and certainly not represented in our very prominent cultural institutions. So Jubilee set about to change this, and these are some of the projects that have taken place. This project is some young children who worked with a visual artist to make a book of drawings about love, and that was published and won an award. The miners in the 80s invited Jubilee artists to come and work with them and document their struggles, because they felt that their views weren't being represented in the media at all. The media was very biased towards government agendas. So Jubilee artists went to work with them, thinking they might train them to use cameras, and the miners said, well, we don't want to learn to use cameras, we're miners, but we want you to tell our story. And telling stories is a very important part of the work we do. We work with communities to identify issues and themes that matter to different people, and to initiate creative projects that champion, celebrate, challenge, and explore these themes. So this has been going on for 20 years, and most of the work that's come out of this has ended up on the web or as photographic exhibitions or in CD-ROM format, mainly because Jubilee Arts at this time was a 6-person organisation and very poor, and had a tiny premises about as big as this room, all in all. So Sylvia King at the time thought, well, actually we want to be a bit bigger, and we think the people of Samwell might need a bit more of a better platform from which to see their projects. And also we want that to have some international resonance, because the organisation has very good connections with Poland, with America, New York particularly. So 6 years ago, I don't know if you're familiar with the way projects are funded in the UK, but when we were coming up to the millennium, we got a lot of money committed to the arts through the lottery funding. But before that money was made available or announced as an option, Sylvia sat and thought about what she wanted the future of Jubilee Arts to be. And this was her back of a fag packet drawing, which includes the fact that we do community projects, community resources. Because we were using, well, the organisation was using lots of different new media tools, such as video, Apple Macs, and cameras, as well as doing creative projects, people were coming to us asking for training. So she thought, well, we need to provide training. If we're providing training, that means we've got skilled people in the borough. This is a borough with 40% unemployment. So what do? Well, we want to support the tech industries. We want to help create spaces where people can set up creative companies. And then that suggests that we also provide design services to clients in the borough and abroad. She also thought, well, what do we do with all the stuff we make that isn't necessarily functional, that's more artistic? We want a gallery. And that really led to thinking about what this place would be. And this is an early idea of a new home for Jubilee Arts that would bring together different things. So people got together and talked about it, and an application was made to the Arts Council for money for a new centre. And the British architect Will Alsop was employed to deliver this new centre. We have taken 5 years, but we've now achieved £22 million from the Arts Council, and we are building a new home for Jubilee Arts. These are some sketches from Will Alsop. And this was an early plan he presented, which we discussed with our local communities, and they didn't like. And the reason they didn't like it is they felt that it was very off to have the art up above ground level. So what we came up with instead was something more like this. This is every image I'm going to show you is so indicative, I can't begin to tell you. You have to sort of really understand these as designers and artists' presentations of things that are possible. So this is right in the sort of forms that the new home for Jubilee will have, but the colours are completely wrong. And what this does is it gives us, Will has designed it with us to create spaces for all of the functions that we want to deliver to the local community and to a transient community of visitors who we hope will travel to West Bromwich from the rest of the UK and abroad to engage with us in the things that we do. Sorry. So the different activities that happen at Jubilee will happen in the new home. A lifelong learning where we give people training, workspaces where small to medium-sized enterprises can work, the gallery, which I'm going to talk about in more detail after this very quick overview, and we'll continue doing our creative projects. I just want to show you a very rapid run through of some of those projects. Interventions is a project we're doing with some people who live in an area nearby called Handsworth, and some of them are artists, some are builders. We worked with them and they've knocked through 5 buildings that were about to be derelict and made an exhibition in the building. The exhibition had work by professional artists and painters and photographers, and it also had paintings by the Rastafari Club, bizarrely. Bedtime Stories is a comic book that we worked with homeless children, not children, teenagers, to tell their stories. And it was quite a lengthy process that involved really going to the hostels and spending time allowing people to come to us. This wasn't a group of people who we could tell them, meet me at this time and spend 2 hours with me. Half of them, have some significant problems with, drugs and, all sorts of mental issues. So we just made sure that we were available for several hours a week for several months. And eventually people started coming and telling their stories. And these were transcribed into comics by a comic artist who works with Marvel Comics. And it's available for publication now. It's really beautiful. We're doing a project in May where we're going to take over a local hotel in West Bromwich. West Bromwich, I have to explain again, is the middle of nowhere in the UK. So we're taking over a hotel and populating it with performance artists and offering a weekend away break for people. And we're also starting to think about how we can start promoting West Bromwich. You can see this is a kind of typical crap British chip shop. This is it's quite nice housing estate. This is the only site currently in West Bromwich. And this is an early visualization of our new building. I'll go back on that. So, what are we doing here? The new building is going to be in the town centre of West Bromwich. This is quite a significant fact. When we started the project, the local borough council decided to become a partner and offered us a piece of land very far away from the town centre. And as soon as we got Will Alsop on board, he said, well, that's not really good enough. This is a really important project. We really need to make a statement. This is about social regeneration and urban regeneration as much as it is about art and culture. And really, I think we should be in the middle of the town. At that time, this spot here, which is where our building's going to be, was a bus station. So you'd go to West Bromwich town centre to leave, and that's not going to encourage any community to feel a sense of, place. So we negotiated with the local borough council, and they indeed gave us this spot, which is just super. And this is a visualization of what the new town centre will be. I think that one thing I want to really impress on people here, because I know that there's a lot of people, at the beginning of their careers, is that this project is now worth 40 million, including all the funding we've got for our activities and the building. And it's really the vision of 4 artists working in a minibus. It's the vision of 4 artists who said, what's available for us in our area isn't enough, and we want more, and actually we're going to do it. And it would take me a long time to explain the ins and outs, and you'd get bored, but it has taken 5 years to get the money to do this. But I think that's quite a testament to a strength of vision that's really, really admirable. And I can say that as someone who joined the project when it was about to succeed, rather than someone, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, I'm admiring my colleagues deeply. It's more than providing a new cultural centre for West Bromwich, it's also inspired other organisations to come to West Bromwich. This here is going to be a new Tesco, and there's going to be a new shopping centre here. It sounds quite cynical to talk about shopping centres, but it's hard to understand what it's like when there really aren't any. and there's absolutely nothing to do. That's when you start getting problems with drugs. We talk to young people in our estates and they say, I don't want to take drugs, I don't like them, but I'm bored and there's nothing to do. And they don't know where they're going. So people really do need culture, and they need a sense of being able to aspire to something and to be included and to know that their stories, their issues, things that matter to them are celebrated and have a place to be explored. Given the social agenda, a lot of people question, what's the point of a gallery? It's a good question. One of the missions of Jubilee Arts has been to engage diverse communities in the process and practice of art making. That's been actioned in many different ways. Sometimes artists work with communities to research ideas and then make pieces of work that the artists might make on their own. Sometimes they work with communities to produce work. Sometimes they just do projects where the process is the most important thing and the outcome is utterly unimportant. In a gallery, outcomes are quite important because you're trying to communicate to people through materials and experiences. And you're trying to really construct experiences that will, well, I like to say that will touch people and will make them laugh and cry. I really hope that you can find a way of moving somebody, and whether you're moving them to excitement, disgust, happiness, tears, or whatever, you're finding a way that you've made a difference as an artist or a designer or indeed a curator. And that's what we're aiming to do. So with our gallery, partly it's a space where we can show some of the projects we've made that traditionally we haven't been able to show in the contemporary art galleries in the UK. There's a very, now in the last 3 years, so-called socially engaged practice has been very hot topic and people have been very interested in it. And that's the trendy word, if you like, for community art. Community art suggests murals, low quality, things that don't matter. We'd like to change that. We'd like to show projects made by artists working with communities alongside other disciplines and really locate it in the cultural discourse that's happening globally across all different creative disciplines. So what we're thinking of with the gallery is really, it's not an art gallery so much as a cultural platform. And it's not really just, it's not about only community art, but what we've decided to take with it is a place for exploring, well, I like to think of it as a long-term collaborative project really, where collaboration and participation between all sorts of different people can be explored through themed exhibitions. So the programs that we run will include community art, they will include media art, visual art and live art, but we won't box them in those pigeonholes. It will be about projects. And we will be interested in artists who work with communities and artists who work with other artists, with scientists, with engineers, anybody who wants to share their process and explore what it means when you start to expand your production by sharing it with other people. Are there any questions so far? I'm gabbling along at quite a pace. No? No? Okay. So in the gallery, what we think we can do is, I've forgotten what I was saying. We can provide a platform for collaboration and participation that is, no, sorry, I was talking about process. How do you make a gallery that brings out some of the very sensitive issues that come out through long-term and intensive and intimate community art processes? How do you expose people who come to that gallery for an hour and a half to a sense of process in the same way that you might expose people to a sense of process you get involved in a workshop for a long period of time? Well, you can't really, but you can start to think about different ways of engaging them to inspire them and give them confidence and excitement about different types of creative projects. So this is a very unusual architecture. Will Alsop has quite strong views, and my first look at this gallery, which is all these coloured in bits, I was a bit frightened. I thought, my goodness, I've got to find collaborative projects that highlight process as their mode of production, but look really good and hang together really well. to a wide audience who may or may not be an art audience. And I've got to make it work in this space. And I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do. But what I do know is that this space makes me question how I operate as a curator. And it makes me have very difficult conversations with artists. And it's really good. So please ask me difficult questions, and I'll try to hide how upsetting it is. So what we have, if I say to give you a walk through the space very rapidly, is an open tray area here, and this is a hole that goes all the way through to the ground floor. Then an enclosed black box space. Then this is a ramp that circles around this. This is one object here. I don't know how many of you can read plans easily. And this is also gallery space. And this needs to operate as a space where people don't lose their sense of being in another world, if you like, as they go around this ramp. And they go around it a couple of times, and then they get to go in another black box space. This isn't, I've missed this bit out because it's a double height space, and then they get ejected down to the ground. So it presents some quite interesting design issues, this space, because its imperative is to be community project based and lots of different art disciplines, and to be a visitor attraction. So that's quite a high demand. We also have to charge people money to come in, not a lot of money, about £4, which I guess is $8 or $9, $6, but local people can buy a pass for a year for £10. So the first thought, looking at it for me, was how are people going to navigate this space? How are they going to read it? And how are they going to know, given that most galleries say don't touch, don't get involved, that we want to invite people to touch and to get involved? So I've taken on board interior designers. Ben Kelly Design are working with me. And I don't know how to describe Ben Kelly other than he's a mad old punk who was arrested on the boat with the Sex Pistols in 1974 and designed the Hacienda Club in Manchester with the subject of the 24-Hour People film. And he's really rocking, and he's great fun. And he brings with him a very good design team, who I'm sure you won't know, but I'll mention their name, PKMB. And together we're thinking about all the different things we want to do with this space. We want to create spaces that are quite carefully choreographed. We want to create spaces that are quite silent, if you like, where artwork can speak louder than the building, can speak louder than the design, and it's a demanding building and a demanding design. And we want to be able to give people contextual information about the artwork, but not just give it to them. What I really don't want to do in this space, given that we're working towards cultural democracy here, is say, this is art and you should like it because, and it's good because. And furthermore, if I do write any opinions of my own as a curator, having selected groups of artists, I'd like it to be very clear to the visitors that they're my opinions. They're not fact. And I'm thinking, are there ways that we can invite visitors to put their opinions forward in the gallery in a dynamic way that makes them feel that they're having a dialogue with us as the organisation? Anyone who's worked in a gallery before will know that if you willy-nilly invite opinions from people, they write rude words, usually, or very, very banal, rubbish comments. So that's quite an interesting design task, which isn't solved, of how we invite people to feed back on things and to say what they think and to feel that that's an interesting thing to have done. I think that's a pretty interesting project that in itself could be an art project or a very good design project. So the other thing that we've done is we've made a decision that if we want to show work in here by professionals and non-professionals, some of the non-professionals are going to need a bit of assistance with the presentation and display of their work. So we're doing something with this ramp structure, and we're turning it into a series of platforms for media art projects that at the moment, well, I'll commit to it, that will be about 8 platforms where we will commission a series of software, tools and toys that allow people who visit the gallery to get engaged with the process on gallery. It's quite a tricksy thing to do because what you run the risk of doing is being over-prescriptive, obviously. And so we've decided to take that on the chin and say, okay, along the ramp we're quite prescriptive. We have a very empty space here, we have a very empty space here. But given that we are going to be quite prescriptive on the ramp, we're trying to think about how wonderful and beautiful we can make it so that even if it's a fixed platform, it can look very stunning. And I'll just show you through some of the designs and maybe raise some of the issues as I go along. One of the first issues for any designers or artists that we work with is that the entrance to the gallery is on the 3rd floor here, and you need to come in down on the ground floor and find your way to the lifts. So those of you who've been working with lift ideas will know that lifts need to be made attractive in that case, because we want to make sure that people find their way to them. So that's already a first design issue with this gallery. One wonderful thing is that Will's design for the building makes air between forms as important as the actual forms themselves. And this, well, these 3 purple lines represent 3 trees that Ben Kelly has decided to plant on Will's ground floor that travel the whole height of the gallery, of the building, but draw your eyes up so that there's an immediate link when you come in the main entrance to the 3rd floor, so that there's a sense of the gallery starting down here. And I think that was a really neat approach, and also to identify the one point in the building you've got the whole height. That's a very early visualization. These trees will carry information, they'll carry display devices, they'll carry data and power, and they'll be networked to all the other platforms along this ramp that theoretically we can have exhibits by different artists and designers that are networked in some way. And at the moment we're exploring whether it's interesting or not to allow some of these different interface artworks to share assets. So one artist might design a sound piece, one artist might design an image-based piece, and is there anything interesting about those assets being manipulated by visitors and shared and sent around a network? And I'm currently working with 5 artists to test this idea, who are Blast Theory, Paul Sermon, Soda, who are a UK-based group, and a chap called Andy Allenson, who used to be Anti-Rom, if any of you have heard of Anti-Rom. So this is another visualization of the trees that started, if you remember, on the ground floor. And this is showing you what it's like when you're walking around the ramp, that you might experience points on the trees where there's screens that have data on them that's either just playback video, or it might relate to some interactive opportunities on the ramp so that people could be controlling that data somehow. And I can only talk very abstractly because I don't know yet what the content is. But what we're thinking of this is that it's almost like a stage set in a way, because up here is a void from that top 3rd floor gallery, and theoretically we could have actors or artists, aerialist artists, hanging down. There could be some interaction with that. There's many different ways that we can use this space to make creative happenings that are stimulating to visitors. So you enter the gallery up here, and we've decided to go for a very designed entry. It's partly because we want to think about the fact this is a new type of space where the rules of the game are going to be different than they are in normal galleries. So we want to explore, be able to convey to people in lots of different ways what those rules might be. And this is an example of we're calling them trees. We've got a series of trees at the entrance to the gallery that carry information. This is a design solution to the fact that Allsop's building at that point has no walls that we can fix to and no ceiling we can fix to, because hanging above this is beautiful, almost boat-shaped pods that are actually the office blocks for me and all the other staff. But we can't fix to it because they're beautiful architectural forms. So it's one of those interesting things that happen. We all love collaboration, but actually when you're collaborating, how do you keep your vision and share it, and where to be generous and where to be a tyrant are quite interesting questions. Here's some more visualizations of ways that trees might operate. And so they could be carrying visual information that will probably be orientation and interpretation. This wouldn't be art content. What I'm talking about is trying to carve up a space that some areas are quite heavily designed and have quite a strong leading people around choreographing effect, but some spaces are more neutral. And some spaces have units that you can go up to and access information. And other spaces may collect information from you. This is a thing that we're exploring at the moment, is if we think that networked interfaces and networked tools and toys is going to be interesting, what's going to be the content? Well, there'll be some content that artists have put in, that are already there, that will be on a database that can be called up from any point along the ramp. And some content we wonder, you know, will people want to submit some information about themselves? So this has cameras, 3 cameras, and it can measure people's weight. It's an idea we're exploring. When you get to this space, you've gone past all the trees. And this is, if you like, a public art space. It very much feels like the rest of the gallery. And it's a bit more like a street than a gallery somehow. It's got that sort of landscaped feel to it. So this is the sort of space we might find artworks that are quite strong statements. This is by the Scottish artist Ross Sinclair. It's called Real Life Dead Church. But it's just an example artwork of the sort of thing you might find in that space. This space is a very large black box sound and light controlled space where any artist using any media who want to work independently of the structure that we're imposing on the space would be able to do work. So that would be where we'd have temporary exhibitions. So probably 8 installations in there in a themed exhibition. And the theme could be anything really. Anything that you might find. We might look at democracy, we might look at housing, we might look at urban planning. But the sort of works it can support are like this piece by Gary Hill, which is a multi-channel video piece that responds to people moving through its tall ships. I don't know if you know it. To enter onto the ramp, it is a linear experience once you've been through these 2 galleries. You go through a cave environment that we're looking at wiring up to support quite complex audio-visual installations. We're embedding a series of specialist speakers into this space and planning for projectors here and here to be part of the infrastructure so that if artists want to use this space in this way, they can. The reason I need to fix this in now is it's quite a difficult building actually, and it isn't a building that will lend itself to supporting these sorts of projects later on. So our task has really been to plan, make some very large assumptions about configurations. Moving down the ramp, we're thinking what sort of display devices might be fixed into it. Somebody asked me earlier about maintenance of large-scale spaces, and it is an issue. We're going to have a small percentage of money annually from the Arts Council, but we are going to be dependent on the client work we do in our community projects, where we do creative projects with the Housing Authority, we do creative projects with the Health Authority. So in planning the gallery, we're aware that we're not going to have all the money we want to do all singing, all dancing, brand new installations every year. So what we're trying to design is a system of things that can support changing content, but also that can frame work by people who are not necessarily professionals in a way that makes them feel excited and confident, shows their work off to the best advantage. And I think that if we do what we're going to do, which is put professional artists' work alongside amateurs, you have to think about the quality jump and be able to support everybody's work in the best way. So that's what we're trying to do. This is just showing you an idea for having speakers built in to create walls of sound that you walk through as you're going around the gallery. And I suppose one question for people who are creators here is, you know, are these platforms any interest to you? Do these sorts of things make you feel that you could make work that could exist in this space? I don't need a direct answer, but it's an interesting, I'd be interested to get some feedback. That just, I don't know if you can, yes. That just indicates that that's a big back wall there. And we've got various proposals from the designers at the moment about ways that images might be displayed with a series of screens. Interestingly enough, although digital technology was always foreseen as having a large role in this space, the actual building makes it quite difficult to have huge projections along the ramp. And the ramp is also, on average, 2.4 meters wide, which is probably about from there to there. So it's quite challenging to think about how we can have content that isn't just light and isn't just objects, but is stuff. There's a design question. It's just a proposal, which probably won't happen, but there's an idea it could be many screens there. I think personally I'd rather see that be a photographical or sacrificial surface for drawings. So this space that I showed you earlier with the screens coming up with the trees is quite extraordinary architecturally. You have the ramp that you're on, this grey bit, and then the light grey bit is the ramp below you. And I don't know, I think very finely on the projected image you can see that if you were to look up from here, you can see through the hole on the 3rd floor. So what this creates is a dynamic landscape that we hope artists will be able to respond to as a quite unusual platform for their work. And I'm just showing you this here again, so you can see that having looked up to this, you're now on a level with it, and you can see that there. So the final gallery space is a 5-meter high black box space, and this is actually a work in progress by one of our artists in residence who interviewed 18 elders in our local community about their lives. Spent a lot of time with them actually to get them to reveal quite intimate, personal stories about things, their lives, their loves, their losses. Stories that can be quite moving, about losing loved ones, about having to give up school because they had to get jobs in factories. And the stories are built into quite complex audio installation where the different sounds roll over each other through these speakers that are set in a circle. And that's just an indication of the sort of projects that we do. We have a quite controversial thing built into our business case, which is that some of the work that gets delivered through the interactives in the gallery should be able to be downloaded at a download area at the end of the gallery. And this is something the pilot artists I'm working with are scratching their heads about how they feel about it. But I think it's really fun. I think it's a quite cool thing to be able to go to a gallery, do something, or see something you love, and walk away with a mug or a t-shirt. Yeah, so that's the gallery. I'll finish here. So, apart from the gallery, which is here, this space, we also have a multifunction space. The managed workspaces for small to medium-sized enterprises are here, and there's a restaurant, and there's all sorts of social things. And hopefully, what we hope is that people will just come and hang out in the building and use it as a space where they just come. In the current town centre, there's a crappy shopping centre that's maybe as big as this room. And all elderly Sikh gentlemen come and sit, they hang out. It's like their office, and we hope that they'll come and sit with us. In terms of design, that's giving us quite a lot of questions around what sort of furniture do we provide in a place that has such a diverse community? Are we going to make just benches? We don't think that's acceptable. Many of our local people prefer to squat, so what sort of chairs do we commission from designers? In terms of our logo type and the fonts that we choose, are they fonts and logo types that translate well into Urdu and Punjabi in terms of the line weights? You know, are they legible to different types of communities? So there's lots of interesting issues that come up when you decide to create an art centre that doesn't want to promote one dominant cultural form. And these are the questions we're asking, really. So I think I'll leave it there and see if anyone's got any questions of me. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but Hannah and I, she was explaining this to me a few days ago, and you gave me one example where I somehow all of a sudden understood this whole operation, and that was this photography event
Oh, yes,
you made
yeah.
a couple of years. Maybe you can
yes,
talk
I should
about
do
this.
that. No, I haven't got an image. We did a project called My Mother, My Daughter, Myself with a group of South Asian women who took very, very beautiful photographs working with Jubilee artists of themselves, their mothers, their daughters, their grandmothers. They were quite indistinguishable from any high-quality photographs, and we wanted to show them in galleries, and we were told that it wasn't appropriate. Some galleries said, oh, we only show contemporary art. And we said, kind of joking, well, these were made last year. But in England, there's a very strong distinction between work by single geniuses, people who work in the art market, so to speak. I'm sure you will understand this distinction, who have a value, a cultural value that is seen to be above people who are operating in a non-professional way. And even amongst professionals, that it's a very harsh market where those that do well do very well, and those that don't are not necessarily represented. We're not saying that we can represent everybody, but we are saying we're making a space where the projects and the ideas are what interest us more than the names. And of course, like anywhere, we're going to want to show big names as attractors, but we're not going to prioritize those. It will always be a balance. So in the gallery, there could be work by any artist from anywhere in the world, but there will always be at least 2 large-scale collaborative projects made with our community as well. Don't know if that helps.
On any given day, what % of visitors do you anticipate being from the immediate borough, and what % from outside?
So 6% from outside, according to our current market research.
6?
Yeah.
Okay.
I should have said is we're expecting 250,000 visits a year, but 180,000 of those will be local people.
What % of, if you like, the content of the building will be generated by those people?
It's going to vary from show to show, but probably at least between 40 and 60%.
I'm wondering what ways you've discussed to integrate that work with the work of the invited artists from outside.
I think it's the same. The point for me is to treat it as any curated exhibition where I'm looking to find projects that we identify a theme, and then we identify projects that fit within that theme and resonate with each other. One of the very big differences from commissioning a show from pure contemporary artists, or particularly from putting together a show of dead artists, is that because we're asking people to share their process, we're really questioning whether we invite artists as individuals or actually according to specific pieces of work, or whether we invite groups of artists and almost curate people rather than work, and then see what ideas come out of that. Now that is potentially an absolutely brilliant process, but has quite huge financial implications. And one of the things that our work has always championed is process. Process carries quite a lot of risks in that if it doesn't work out and there's not an outcome, you've got no outcome. So frankly, I don't know how to manage that at the moment, and that's the next stage of work.
Where is the design stage right now?
We're about to go on site in about 6 weeks.
Construction?
Yeah. But the images I've shown you are quite early. These are several months old.
Written in February 2000.
Yes. They're not all.
So maybe I ask a question representing other people here in this place. If I understood right, you are open to listen to people who want to contribute things. You're interested in young people contributing things.
Yeah.
And what would be a way a person can get in contact with you if he thinks he has something you should take in consideration?
Take a card, email me. I'm very interested to hear projects. One of the things about the schism in England between contemporary art venues and community art is Jubilee has very low visual arts profile. So currently you've got me at a good time. I'm not swamped with proposals at the moment. I'm always interested. I'm looking at ways to plan our programs. We do have a website for the gallery where we'll shortly be announcing programming opportunities, but we haven't done that yet. Probably as this project, we haven't been launched in the media yet, so we're going to have quite a big launch when we go on site, and then we expect to hear quite a lot from lots of different artists. And then we'll never give up on open submission, but we'll probably look at open submissions every 6 months or every year. But sort of between now and June, you've got quite a lot of my time.
Yeah, the question, there are, like throughout the world, you find like science museums and museums that this kind of reminds me of. So looking at these kind of things, what do you want to do differently, or what are the things that you find really good about existing adventure, science, art museum kind of things?
Oh, those are two different questions, aren't they? What I find really good about existing science and art or science museums.
Yeah, what is the big difference? Or
the difference here is that this is community-led, and the projects that we have will be, we're not about science or art, and we're also not protecting any particular history. We're trying to represent culture as it is, you know, in our borough and locally and internationally now. So culture is a very present thing. We don't have a collection like most science museums and art museums. So we're not protecting one dominant story either. We're really trying to showcase different stories and celebrate different ways of being and existing in culture. I mean, for me, having trained as a painter in England in a very English traditional way, with our ideas of genius and single voice and all this, it's really interesting to see some of the approaches to making that exist in, for example, India, where it's much more part of everyday life. You know, most people who meet me who find out what I do say, oh, I'm not very good at art, I don't know about art. So really I hope one thing that comes out of this project is that people feel like they can get involved, but don't feel patronised, and that there's no issue of it being lower quality, but it's a different agenda. In terms of what I like, I also like mainstream art galleries. I love them, I love going to them, and I like looking at objects, and I get excited by them, really. I mean, does that answer?
It's an interesting question, how to make sure that if you give if you're open for audience participation, a very active participation, if you open a space for this, an environment for this, it's you need some strategies to prevent it from turning out into a huge pixelation of boredom or cacophonia or whatever you will call it. And if you make the rules too narrow, to let's say to save let's say a harmony potential, to make that for sure, you're creating some sort of weird kindergarten, a game arcade sort of environment.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you thought about this. So, have you made any conclusions so far? Do you know more than we know?
No. But I also, what you've seen is indicative of the design process we've had to undertake, which is that we're doing what's called in architecture a two-stage process, where in order to get the cheapest building possible, we've had to commit to many of the elements now. So you've seen a very distorted view of programming. I've shown you a lot of how we're planning digital platforms, but I've shown you nothing of the other platforms, and that's simply because we haven't had to do them yet. So if I were to have the opportunity to come here again in 2 years or 1 year, or even after we'd opened in 2005, which I don't think I said, I think you'd see a very different picture. And that's precisely our project now, is to manage that tension. We're not ashamed of the theatrical, and we're not ashamed of entertainment at all. But I think that that risk of it being like an outsized kindergarten is something I would feel disappointed by if we didn't avoid it. But I would say we probably don't mind if it's a bit of a playground for children of all ages. I should have also said that we have live artists who live in the gallery and inhabit the space, and that live art program can add quite a good edge and good symbiotic relationship to the fixed-in media projects.
I have a question about, well, the design that you present here is an engaging one, but it's, given the context that you showed us in the surrounding community, this is a very challenging building and space. So I'm sure that, for instance, it'll be very easy to engage youth,
Yeah.
in everything that you're proposing. I'm wondering what your strategies are for engaging other members of the community, because you've got this very large schism between this institution and the sort of, nature of the surrounding area.
You kind of do, except Jubilee's been doing projects, the organisation leading this. This is a new home for Jubilee Arts, and Jubilee's been doing projects for 25 years. One of the projects, for example, is called Silver Surfers, where we work with the elderly population to teach them web design. And they point things out to us like, well, the internet's all very well, but we can't read it, and discuss different way of working. So when we're designing exhibits or inviting artists to do projects, I mean, the project I showed you with the speakers is a perfect example. Everybody involved in that was over 65. And when we showed it in the town centre a week ago, the majority of visitors were elderly people, because probably it was their friends. So it's kind of that idea that we're not necessarily looking to create an audience, we already have one. I should have also said that Jubilee is massively supported by the local community. We have a thing in some areas of the UK at the moment called devolved responsibility, where local communities are given money by their local council to choose how that money is spent in redoing their area, like fixing roads and fixing their doors. And the community in the vicinity of this project was given £50 million to make its area nicer, and elected to give this project £2 million. Now that would never happen in London. I'm a Londoner. To find that a local community of people who are apparently not art people have given £2 million for a cultural project suggests they need it and want it. So we have to I think we have to keep checking in with people, and I think your concern is absolutely fundamental, not just valid, it's at the core.
Well, I think several of these questions are kind of moving around the edges of, I think, an essential question about the role of government, but such a project as this is inconceivable in the United States. Absolutely inconceivable.
It's pretty inconceivable in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, it's beyond, it was actually thrown out by the Arts Council, and our chief exec lobbied, everybody she could to get it approved. So.
But there is a kind of, in Europe generally, a kind of socialist presence and a belief that public money should go towards certain things for the public good and so on, which is at the moment totally absent in our country. But beyond that, I could see the possibility of some members of the community considering this an elitist enterprise and being, literally landed from outer space. And so I think, along with what you've done with the community being involved with the planning of the building, I'm wondering what amount of administration, and this gets back to Kristen's question too, what amount of administration will be local?
Of administration?
Of the building and of its activities.
Mostly when you get lottery money, you're tied into creating wealth in that area as well. I'm not quite sure what you mean by administration, actually. Who's running it?
Yes.
Well, there are people there like me who have been imported because there were no visitor attractions there before and I have a background. But I'd say that of a current staff of 60, 20 of us have come from other parts of the UK and the rest are local. And we will, be looking to train local people to work with us. We're already, in terms of the live artists for the gallery, for example, working with the local college, and we're actually training their performance students to do the sort of interventions we're interested in.
And of course, I'm wondering what will happen if that overlaps with any political activity.
It's a risk.
I'm wondering about a couple practical aspects. In the initial perspective, sort of a map view of the area, there was a large area across the boulevard that looked as if it was painted blue in the map there. Is that a large factory, or are you right across the street from a... Yeah, that's Tesco.
It's an enormous superstore.
Oh, all right. Well, that would fit. Okay.
Yeah.
It looks so huge.
Tesco is a food store, and this is going to be like a mall, which is going to be the primary mall in the area, which is actually quite good for us because it will bring visitors in, and it's also good for people in West Bromwich. I mean, I have to explain about West Bromwich that I have to leave work at 5:45 because there's no bus after that to get out where I need to go, and there's one restaurant. So all these commercial concerns are actually quite great because they're providing places for people to get things and do things.
And the other question I had was, with that rather open structure, it must be a bear to keep warm in the wintertime.
It's going to be very interesting. We're working with with a company called Battle McCarthy, who are innovating all sorts of fancy new thermal approaches to heating and controlling the environment that are completely over my head, but I'm assured it will be comfortable.
Well, to begin with, I definitely have to compliment you on such a huge scale project, and that I also am not certain that it's something that could fly in our city or culture. But seeing that, it sounds as if you're looking to literally recreate this town with this art project, which I think is fantastic. How much of the administration or visiting artists are anticipated in actually being permanent residents in that community? Because you were speaking about taking the bus to and from. And for me, I don't know exactly how far away that is, where the town is from, say, from London or from other areas that are more habitable.
For me, first I should say that I'm renting in that area because I've gone there for this project. And I go to Birmingham. I live in Birmingham, which is 8 miles away. It's the nearest big city. And West Bromwich just has no rental market. So that's why I'm not renting in West Bromwich. Basically because housing is so cheap, you buy a house, or you've got no money, so you live in the most awful place that, frankly, even to be very politically correct, I'm not prepared to do. But in terms of London, it's about an hour and a half by train, 2 hours driving. It's very, very close. It's about the same from other major cities in the UK, like Liverpool, you might have heard of, or Manchester. What was the other part of the question?
Well, just
artists.
Is part of the meditation on the whole process is actually creating a more permanent community, because you spoke about there'll be 20% of the administration will be coming from other parts of London, and you'd have visiting artists or artists in residence projects, and like how would that create more of a permanent space within that, rather than, well, from 8 to 6:15 there's going to be this cultural event, and then on off hours, then the community goes back to whatever it's been doing.
Oh yeah, I should have said that we're open till probably midnight in terms of also our event space is a space that local people can hire for their weddings, but we'll sometimes have gigs there, and we'll definitely have nights for small up-and-coming bands to show off their wares. We have a restaurant which will be, you know, medium range. Well, actually, to be honest, we don't know. We're looking into whether we should be a super cheap chips and burgers place, or whether we should be something a bit fancy that people have to go on, you know, celebrations. Artists, at the moment we have 2 artists in residence, one of whom I share a flat with, but people come and rent an apartment in Birmingham really, or a house in West Bromwich if they can bear them. And we haven't worked that out precisely, but we'll definitely continue the residency programme, and we also you know, this is a platform from which we can do international exchanges in a way the organisation couldn't do without this.
And for the artists that you're accepting proposals for now, is that for actual, you know, traditional exhibitions or interactive exhibitions, in addition to proposing something to work with the population at the moment?
Yes.
So
yes.
Basically, you're open for.
Yeah. When I say for us, we think that participation can happen at many stages, and that could be by you finding something out about a community at the point of your research and your project. You might decide to engage people in the production, but of course participation happens at the point of encounter as well. And our trick curatorially is to make sure that we get a very good balance of those things. So the other thing is that it's an intellectual engagement, you know, that we really care about. But what we can do now that we've got a new home with an exhibitions platform is expand what we've been doing for 20 years as an organisation of getting people involved in making and getting people involved in the discourses, because I think that when you start getting involved in the discourses surrounding art and art making in culture and society, then you get to be able to locate yourself and to put your position across. And that's something that many of the communities we represent have not had the opportunity to do. These are people who probably wouldn't go to Tate Modern because they don't think it's for me.
Exactly, exactly. And just one last question. Can you just speak a little bit, elaborate a little bit more about the Artists in Residence program, if there is a program at the moment?
There's a very...
Learn 3 languages.
6 months, actually. 3 months, 6 months. The Artist in Residence program at the moment is very much related to the fact we're landing this spaceship in the middle of West Bromwich. So what we're doing is inviting artists to come and spend time with us and get to know our communities. And really, for me, I could put up a show that people who go to Tate would love. I know what they want. Frankly, I don't know what people in West Bromwich want. I'm inviting artists to do that research for me as art projects. And so that's what's happening. So it's really about investigating the local community. And then we've got a program of interventions in the town. So Jeff Broadway's project, The Elders, which is the speakers, was presented in the shopping centre over a week last month. And we're just evaluating how people responded to that. We'll be doing the intervention in the hotel, which includes turning the foyer into a area where you can have every type of your future told, you know, crystal ball gazing, palm reading, and then you leave with a dossier of your future, and that's a performance artist called, whose name I've forgotten. So following that, you know, we have another artist called Norbert Brunner from Austria who's going to make a big plastic capsule that's huge, that's basically a platform for showing video work, and he will have gathered stories from people in the community on video that he projects through this. He's going to be asking people in a random way about some of the key buzzwords to do with cultural production, like what does culture mean to you? You know, what does any of these words mean? And just sort of start that dialogue happening.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I don't know if everybody's realizing that, but for me it's clear. I mean, this scale project with this, let's say, type of architect with this sort of reputation like Alsop, this takes place in major cities in the world, or let's say in wealthy cities in the world. I don't know not a single example where it ever took place in such a environment of poverty. So just by yeah, that's good. You can tell us about it. So what I would expect, like being not an expert in these things, that if you bring such an activity into a town with 300,000 people, what is not so small, in a town with 300 people and only one restaurant, this will be a successful place, pretty sure. Do you have any experience with projects ever happened in these sort of environments? How unique is it as an operation in total?
In the UK, it's unique. I don't know what Anna's example is.
Can you talk?
That's actually also why I was asking. There's one in Belgium in a very poor area that was like from industrial, and it's like very high unemployment rate, and they put like this, it's called Parc d'Aventure Scientifique, and it's a kind of like a adventure museum space that's for families especially, but they also invite artists to show stuff, and some things work out really well, and I think others don't, and I don't know if they live up to the audience rates they want to have, and so that's kind of like one example I know. I think also that's, well, I'm not quite sure. I mean, that's the thing, what I was asking, because you would want to investigate with these kind of things if you're doing something like that yourself, what does not work out. And I think in Germany, in the Ruhrpott, they are actually also investing a lot of money culturally, because it's a ex-industrial area and high unemployment and nothing's going on. And that's where countries often put money to make it an attractive place again. And although your funding has somehow come about differently, which is very nice. Not just the country says this is a terrible place, here you have money, do something.
It's also, we are a business actually. We're what's called a company limited by guarantee, and we have commercial clients, and we will not be running on 100% funding. We will be earning a lot of our income through the project work we do with the Housing Authority. We're invited to do health projects, public information projects, that we always take a particular slant on. And no, we don't know, partly because what we are is it's like shifting sand in some ways, because we're really carving our identity as this opportunity arises. I mean, this was a big idea had by Sylvia King, and it's kind of happened. And as you go through the process of fundraising and bringing in other voices, other designers, other artists, different agendas get fed in, and some of them make you stop and think, that's better. Maybe we'll do it like that. And some of them force you to do it their way because they're giving you lots of money. And so it's just balancing this process is a sort of perpetual tension that you need to manage.
So maybe we can also somehow add the Le Fresnois project to this line of activity, even though that was different. But anyway, as you know, so in Tourcoing, Roubaix, in northern France, so that big project for this art center started from the motives of kind of situating something sort of like pretty far out in a totally rundown and district which had a very high crime rate, and also much poverty, everything like that. So this is in the very northern France, and this was a big national project by the Finnish Ministry of Culture, for a couple of years, and it was very interesting in the sense because it was this center was built actually in existing buildings which had been the kind of the center of the city in the early 20th century, before the city got run down and they were closed. It was this sort of like a huge entertainment complex with like skating rings and even a horse manege for and it's just unbelievable. And Bernard Tschumi then designed this very famous structure, which is like an umbrella around the building. So the problem, I think, with Le Fresnoy, which opened in the early 90s, is that I don't think it really has been able to build any kind of a real connection with the community. So
Yeah, I know people who work there.
People commute from Paris, actually, now that they have the fast train connection between Paris and Lille. So it started from these idealistic ideas that it would actually activate that really, really gloomy neighborhood. I went there a couple of times, and it really is still gloomy. And I wonder, so it looks like Christian's saying, so it looks like this kind of an initiative which is far too open towards the local community and actually happens really in that community, kind of somehow isolated community, has a much better chance to succeed. Maybe this attraction of Paris around those centers, so that the proximity, all these factors have played a role, that it's too tempting to just bring everybody from Paris and use it as a kind of a satellite and as nothing else.
I think that this project, I'm less concerned about the locals using it than getting it, really operating as a visitor attraction, because we already have an excellent relationship with many local communities, and people know about Jubilee Arts. In a funny way, West Bromwich is the most art literate community in the UK, because so many, and very diverse. I mean, ordinary people in the shopping centre, not everybody, I'm not going to be all Billy Graham about it, but people who understand Jubilee projects have a very wide understanding of what an art project can be in terms of a strategy, in terms of an intervention into a housing authority, which is bigger than a lot of people you might meet elsewhere who've been exposed to more traditional art forms. So this for me is fascinating, having grown up on a diet of painting and sculpture, which of course I still love. So,
So if there are not any further questions, I want to thank Hannah for this presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Rashan and Victoria for getting me here. And please take a card, anyone who wants, to keep in touch.